Anatoly Karpov was one of the greatest players to grace the game of chess. He was a chess world champion on 6 occasions. First, when Bobby Fischer famously refused to defend his title, then beating Viktor Korchnoi twice in a row. When the World Championships were split in 1993, Karpov beat Jan Timman, Gadakamsky, and Viswanathan Anand in succession. Not only was Anatoly Karpov one of the greatest chess players to ever grace the game, but he also played a style of chess that has not been replicated in over 50 years at the highest level. A style of chess so efficient and impossible to play against that it warranted a new word be added to the vocabulary of every chess player: Karpovian. In today's video, we'll be looking through a game that was played in 1974 between Anatoly Karpov and 7-time German chess champion Wolfgang Unzicker. A game that can only be described as one that truly defined how Karpov played. Before we do get into the game, today's video wouldn't be possible without the sponsor, ChessMind. ChessMind.ai is a next-generation AI-powered chess improvement platform who also happens to be the sponsor of today's video. ChessMind.ai is a next-generation AI-powered chess improvement platform. Not only does ChessMind have completely free puzzles, but they also have a wide range of courses you can select from less than $5 per month. All of the courses are handcrafted by Chilean Grandmaster Mauricio Flores and are designed to make you a master of any opening variation in around an hour. They perfectly balance top-quality theory with ease of learning to take the boring out of any study. Once you've completed these opening courses, you can either play puzzles deriving from said opening, or dive into their AI integrations which quiz your knowledge on what you've just learned. The AI acts as a replacement for a coach, asking you to find characteristics of certain positions and explain the advantages and disadvantages. You can check out ChessMind.ai with the link in the description, which also gets you 30% off your purchase. But apart from that, let's get into the game. We're going to go through absolutely everything there is to know about this game. We're going to go through all of the opening theory, as I think it's very important to understand the opening to understand the middle game plans that arise from the opening. We're going to look at the middle game plans and look at the end game as well. So we're going to look at absolutely everything in this opening, and we start off with e4 and e5. Now at the Grandmaster level, you don't really see anything other than knight f3. It is the most common opening in chess, followed by knight c6. Oftentimes we do see the Petrov at the Grandmaster level, especially the Super Grandmaster level, but in this game we are looking at knight c6, followed by bishop b5, which is the Roy Lopez. Now, one important distinction that I want to make early on, because I see a lot of people get confused about this when looking at the Roy Lopez, is where is the Berlin draw? How do we get to the Berlin draw? I remember when I was first starting chess, it was something that confused me a little bit as well. I really didn't know the line. The Berlin draw cannot exist if the move a6 is played here. The move a6 is called the Morphy defense, and if a6 is played, there will be no Berlin draw. The move that goes into the Berlin draw is knight f6, which is called the Berlin defense, and this is the continuation. It is castles, knight takes e4, d4, and importantly knight d6. The bishop has to be on this b5 square because it needs to come with tempo. After this, we will take in the center, sacrificing our bishop. After the knight takes, a4 traps the knight. They can jump their knight into the center. We take, they take, we take with our queen, and they play d5, to which we en passant, they take with their queen, and this is the famous perpetual check that you've probably seen in a couple Grandmaster games before. So, with the move a6 on the board, and the bishop dropping back to a4, we cannot have the Berlin draw anymore, because the bishop is not on b5, and after knight f6, which is played in the game, and we castle, they can take in the center. This is the open Roy Lopez. This can still be played, but after a move like d4, and let's say they want to jump back, there is no pressure on the b5 square anymore, so this isn't a draw. Somewhat of a drawish position. A lot of games at the Grandmaster level do end up in draws in this position, but this isn't a theoretical draw. Instead of getting an open Roy Lopez, though, we get the exact opposite, which is the closed Roy Lopez. The point of the open Roy Lopez is that after takes in the center, there is a lot of pressure on the file that the king is on because it's not castled. So there's one loose piece, there is this e5 pawn, which could be considered a loose piece because the bishop could capture here, and there is the king behind it. So if the rook were ever to go to e1, there would be a lot of pressure on this file. However, if you shove the bishop onto the file as well, suddenly there is not so much pressure, and black is going to be forced to defend this pawn because it now can be captured. So this is called the closed Ruy Lopez. It's a lot more closed, as the name would suggest, and it's a lot more positional than the open Ruy Lopez as well. So we get bishop e7 here. After bishop e7, now we have a real need to go and defend this pawn on e4. For example, if we don't defend it and we play something like h3, they're going to now take this pawn in the center. They might throw in b5 as well, just to get the bishop back onto another diagonal, but now they can take this pawn in the center. After rook e1, they can play something like d5, or d5 in the center, protecting this knight. If you play something like d3, they're going to play knight c5, and now they can trade off this bishop as well, which is not going to be the greatest for the white pieces. So we want to play rook e1, defending this pawn. d3 is also viable, but it is a little bit flat. It doesn't really allow any potential. This position is going to become very boring very quickly because, you know, we've got symmetrical pawn structures and no real open files. Are we going to play knight e1 and f4? This is not a very creative plan at all. So we don't really get to go for general Ruy Lopez ideas if we do commit with that d3 move, so rook e1 is usually chosen by grandmasters. The threat here is we're probably threatening to take on c6 here. For example, if they play something like h6, we're going to take. After d takes, we win the pawn in the center. That's a very simple way to get an advantage. So obviously Wolfgang Unzicker is not going to allow this. Instead of playing a move like h6, he goes to defend this pawn. There are a couple of ways to do this. d6 is one way, just simply defending it with another pawn, but you can also start with this move b5, which kicks the bishop back, and now the bishop cannot trade itself off for the knight and remove the defender of the central pawn. So the bishop now has to go back to b3. Something very important about this move is that you cannot play this move knight a5 just yet. If you play the move knight a5, you voluntarily remove the defender of this e5 pawn, and the knight will take it. We don't really care about losing the bishop for the knight if we are up a pawn, so you can't play the move knight a5 just yet. What you can do first, though, is play the move d6, defending the pawn, so now we have no need for this knight to stay defending this pawn. So now that this pawn in the middle of the board is defended by the pawn on d6, black's new threat is to play knight a5. They can't play knight a5 right now because it's white's turn to move, and white only has a couple of ways to prevent the move knight a5. The first move is something like a4. If knight a5 comes now, we will play a takes b, and you cannot take the bishop because we'll take back with the c pawn, and now this pawn is pinned to the rook. You could try something like bishop b7, but then we have b takes a, and after something like rook takes, and bishop takes, we have this move d4 striking in the center, and black is just not really developed enough in comparison to white. We've got a big center, we're going to chip away at it. We're actually immediately threatening to win a pawn here. If they play something like e takes, we're going to take with the knight, and white just has a very good active position. Our king's safe, our pieces are active, we've got an active rook and active knights. We don't have any weaknesses in the position. Maybe you could argue that this b3 pawn is a little bit weak, but black also has the backwards pawn in this position, and white is looking very good. So black doesn't really want to go down into this line. We also don't have to play a4. There is another move that can be played in this position that Anatoly Karpov does play, which is the move c3, which is a very common move in any Ruy Lopez setup where the bishop has this spot to go back to with c2, but we are also threatening to strike centrally with d4. This is a much more popular plan than playing a4 because we want to play in the center. We don't want to play the slow game around the edges of the board. We want to prepare this d4 move at some stage. In response to this, Wolfgang Unzicker does not want to play knight a5 anymore because it would just kind of improve the white position. The bishop wants to go back to c2 anyway. So what can Wolfgang do? There are a couple plans in this position. The first one is where you might want to put this bishop. Bishop b7 is kind of an Archangel-esque variation type of move where you fianchetto the bishop this way. I don't think this is the exact move order of the Archangel-esque variation. You can also try and put the bishop on this e6 square, but that comes with its own problems where you might have this trade, and now black has doubled pawns in the center of the board, so I'm not exactly sure if you want to do that either if you are the black pieces. What you do know you want to do is castle, because you don't want to castle this way into these pawns that you've just mangled over this side of the board. So Wolfgang does castle short, which is a move that he knows he's going to play regardless. Now comes a quite interesting move. You might have thought that if c3 was played, the next logical step would be to play d4. D4 is actually a slight mistake in this position, because if we play d4, we allow this bishop g4 move. Bishop g4 doesn't look super threatening, but the problem is we can't play a move like h3. Our hand is forced. We're not worse in this position by any means, but our hand is forced, and we are absolutely forced to play either d5 or play bishop e3, which leads to a somewhat stagnant game. If we play bishop e3, there are some complicated lines with knight takes e4 that we won't look at because it might take too long. But d5 also just forces the structure, and we don't really want to commit to a structure like this too soon. d5 might be a move that we want to play later on, but we're just not ready to play it. And if there's no reason to rush with d4, why should we? There is a very intuitive and kind of thematic move in the Ruy Lopez. This also occurs in many openings for white, where you want to play this h3 move. This happens in the Benoni and the King's Indian when you're playing for the white pieces. A lot of people will be familiar with this move, where you just don't want to allow this bishop to get out. Realistically, the bishop cannot land here now. It cannot land on the f5 square. We're not really worried about it landing on the d7 square, and again, if it lands on e6, we can take, and these are going to be doubled pawns for any kind of middle game, so this is going to be some kind of an advantage for the white pieces. So h3 is a super important move there, a slow move, but it does allow us to strike with d4 at some stage later. We really don't want to be wasting time with d3. If we can play d4, we definitely want to play it. So after the move h3, the question now arises, what is the plan for black here? It's a little bit difficult to figure out a plan. There are simple moves that can be played for the black side, like bishop b7 and rook e8, but overall, what is the plan? How does black make progress in this position? The idea that Wolfgang comes up with is actually quite a clever one. I actually don't see this too much being played at my level, but it's to go for this move knight a5. Knight a5 was a threat before because we wanted to trap the bishop, but now the bishop can go to c2 and drop back, and now black cannot take this bishop, and they've got a knight on the edge of the board. So what is the plan here? Well, the plan was actually to get the knight out of the way of the c7 pawn so they could strike forwards with c5. c5 doesn't necessarily stop the move d4. d4 can actually still be played and is played, but it creates a lot more space in the black position. The knight can always hop back in this position, and the knight can hop forwards and maybe reroute like this. The continuation, as we said, was d4. This is a very, very common continuation in the Ruy Lopez. We've actually come with just a full threat here. The threat is to take this pawn. Black doesn't particularly want to open up this position either. Usually when these positions open up, it does favor the white side, just because their pieces are a bit more organized. You know, we've got this bad bishop over here clumped in between all of its pawns. We've got this knight on the edge of the board. We've got this isolated pawn here, and generally speaking, you would assume that white is going to be a little bit better here, and especially when they've got all the time in the world to calculate in a classical game, white should end up being better in this position. So black really doesn't want to be trading all those pawns down. They need to figure out something else, and the threat right now is d takes e, d takes e, and knight takes e. This is the threat right now, and the pawn will be one for white. So black has to defend this in some way, and the way that they choose to defend it is with queen c7, bringing their queen to the 7th rank, starting to connect their rooks as well, and they are now defending this e5 pawn with their queen. There are a couple of ways for white to continue this position. One of those ways is by playing d4. This is a very committal move though, and you'll notice throughout this game, Karpov doesn't like to make commitments unless he is 100% ready. If he thinks there is another way to achieve the same goal, but a little bit better, he is going to do it. And instead of playing d5, he chooses to go for this knight bd2 move, which is a common idea in the Ruy Lopez. Generally, you want to wrap the knight around to f1 and to g3, and then the knight sees these very strong squares over this side of the board. It's a very long reroute that happens in almost all Ruy Lopez games. It's a very common theme. Again, if these pawns are traded off in the center, this can only benefit white because of the isolated pawn and the kind of mixed up pieces. So black has to figure out a move here. The top engine move is actually to trade down in the center and try to defend this endgame where you do have this kind of bad setup. But in this position, knight c6 is played by Wolfgang, bringing the knights to the c6 square, but also now inviting the move d5, which Karpov finally cashes in on. He's ready to play d5. It now comes with tempo. So before, if we wanted to play d5, this wouldn't have come with tempo. This would have allowed knight c4 and knight b6 rerouting. But now that we've played knight bd2 and knight c6, which is a theoretical move, by the way, we now have this move d5, forcing the knight to go either back to a5 or to go to d8. In this position, knight a5 is actually the best move. I don't think it would be super justified if it were to be played by Wolfgang though, and knight d8 is played. The reason that I was so impressed by this game and I wanted to show it to you guys was because of how accurately Karpov plays. There are plenty of positions like this one where I'll read out the exact engine evaluation for you, and Karpov actually justifies it. He actually knows why which move is slightly better. The top engine move is B3 with plus 0.87. The second top engine move is A4 plus 0.82. And the third top engine move is knight F1 plus 0.72. There is a 0.1 difference between knight F1 and A4. And Karpov knows it. We said before that Karpov doesn't want to play a move until it is absolutely the perfect time to play it. Usually, I think that 9 times out of 10, any Roy Lopez player will play knight F1 here because it is the natural continuation of this opening. It's intuitive, it seems like the right move to play, and if you were to ask any Roy Lopez player, should I play A4 or should I play knight F1, they would probably say, they seem about the same. I would probably 50-50, I don't think it really matters which one you play. Karpov doesn't think like that. He wants to play the best move. He knows that if he plays 10 best moves in a row, all of those slight evaluation shifts are going to add up. So in this position, Karpov does not immediately go for knight F1. He goes for A4. A4 comes with an immediate threat. The threat is to take on B5. For example, if we play H6, we're going to take this. The pawn is pinned again. We've seen this before, so they cannot play a move like H6. Of course, Wolfgang is not at 1000 ELO. He is not going to play H6. There are a couple of natural moves to play in this position. The first one that you might think of is something like bishop B7, defending the rook, but this is kind of hope chess because we're not going to take this pawn and allow them to get this open file. We're just going to say, that's not a great spot for your bishop. I'm going to play knight F1 now. What Karpov would do if bishop B7 was played, he would say, okay, you've just made your bishop worse than it already was. Now I'm going to play knight F1. Realistically, you want to keep your bishop on this diagonal. So something like bishop B7 should not be played. In this position, what should be played is the move rook B8, defending this pawn, and now after this pawn takes, it is not pinned to the other side. So something like A takes B5, which was played in the game, can be played, followed by A takes B5. You don't want to take with the rook, by the way, because this allows knight C4. You want to control the C4 square with the pawn. So instead of rook takes B4 or rook takes B5, A takes B5 is played. Now you might be thinking, okay, that made a lot of sense. Karpov saw why one move was better than the other a couple of moves ago. He saw that if he played it this way, he would get control of the file. So now he's going to play knight F1. No, what he actually does is he wants more. He doesn't want to play knight F1. If you play knight F1 in this position, you actually lose about 0.3 on evaluation. It's a little bit difficult to tell you why. I'll do my best. The point is because of this move C4. What C4 does is it looks like it locks up the position. You would think that, okay, Karpov should be pretty happy with this. The position is locked up and now he can go and play on the queen side, or the king side, I should say. The problem is it's not quite locked up. If you allow this, you are always giving black the potential to play this B4 move. Very, very annoying because it would kind of shut in your bishop and you would run out of space. And Karpov doesn't want that. He doesn't want black to have anything. And you'll see Karpov makes these small decisions throughout this game that lead to black having no moves. That's not an exaggeration. We'll get to a point in this game where black is going to have no moves, where the engine is literally going to suggest that Wolfgang shuffles his king around and waits to be checkmate. That is literally what happens, and the checkmate doesn't come for another 30 moves. It doesn't actually happen in this game. The game is resigned. So in this game, Karpov doesn't want to play knight F1 because he sees that C4 is going to be a problem. So how do you fix this? How do you make sure that C4 can't be played? Well, the answer is you play B4. That's what Karpov plays in this game. B4 is a very, very good move. If C4 comes now, the position is definitely locked. There's no more pawn breaks. There is no more B4 coming later. This is a very locked side of the board. This is what Karpov wants. Now a move like knight F1 can be played because there is no more potential on this side of the board. Karpov wants to play on the queen side. He wants to play on his turn. So C4 is probably not what you want. If C takes B, we are just going to play C takes B as well. This side of the board is now locked off again. There is really no pressure on the C file. This position is plus 1.2 because white is going to have all of the fun in this position. We have the open file. We have all of the good piece movement. Maybe knight B3 and knight A5 is going to come. We have plenty of ideas. We can also target this pawn, which is maybe a weakness on the B5 square as well. So this is also not something that black really wants in this position. So black is maybe okay to kind of keep this tension here, and so is Karpov. Karpov is happy with this as well. In response to this, Wolfgang plays the move knight b7, which is a little bit difficult to explain. There is also bishop b7 in this position. It's already just a very unintuitive position to play for the black side. You would imagine that something like, I think an intuitive move might be something like knight e8, which is not one of the best moves. I think it's the 5th top engine move. This is probably what I would think of to play in the black position if I was playing blind without an engine, and the idea would be to go forwards with f5. This is apparently wrong. Knight f1 is very strong here. But Wolfgang goes for this knight b7 idea, which is a decent idea according to the engine. The continuation here is very simple. It's the plan that Karpov has wanted all along, but was waiting for the exact right moment to play it. He can now play knight f1. Now there is no more counterplay on this side of the board. We have the full control of the A file, and there's really not a lot for Wolfgang to be doing in this position, so now Karpov can begin with his plan of rerouting his knight. If you put this position into an engine, you can actually do that. If you want to put this position into an engine, I really encourage it, because the engine's suggestions of what black should do in this position is hilarious. It genuinely has no idea what to do, even though it only evaluates this position to be plus 0.3 for the white pieces. This should be a draw, but the engine just doesn't know what to do. It doesn't think that there is any progress to be made for the black side. It also argues that there's none for white to be made. There's no progress that white can make. Even though I think it's a pretty intuitive position for the white pieces, the engine is arguing, I'm kind of in a fortress right now. Already, the engine is supposedly arguing that it's a fortress. It is suggesting moves like rook d8. It is suggesting moves like bishop d7. It is suggesting nothing moves that pass the turn onto white and argue that white has no clear way to attack. It doesn't need to make any progress in the position because it has the perfect setup already. That is literally what the black position is arguing right now. Anatoly Karpov is going to argue differently though. He is not going to lay down and kind of accept the draw in this position. Of course he's not. It's black's turn to move and they play bishop d7. Again, we're going to kind of not explain black's moves because there is no explanation. We don't need to explain moves when they mean nothing. Literally, this is move 17. This game goes until move 44. The remainder of black's moves essentially mean nothing. If they do mean something, I'll mention it, but they're all nothing moves. You'll see that as the game goes on. These moves do nothing. They pass the turn onto white. So Anatoly Karpov is now faced with the challenge, how do I win a game where my opponent is just playing for a draw? So Anatoly Karpov begins with this move, bishop e3. The engine thinks this is a mistake, even though the evaluation is still fine. It actually also thinks that bishop e3 is the top engine move. That's chess.com for you. I think the reason that it thinks it's a mistake is that the notations of the move run off a different engine than the actual evaluation bar. So that's just kind of a chess.com error. Bishop e3 is an absolutely fine move. It connects the queen with the rook and makes sure that rook a8 is always going to be met with some kind of defense of the a1 rook. With that being said, rook a8 is the next plan for black. They want to try and seize control of this file in one way or another. White doesn't really want its queen to be controlling this a1 square. It would much prefer the rooks control it. So, for example, if we passed a move and played something like knight h2, they would take on a8 and we would have to take with the queen, and we don't really want our queen being all the way on this side of the board when it should be attacking the king over here. So, Karpov's solution to this is to play queen d2. Connecting the rooks, and now the rook can take with the other rook, and the queen is elevated off the 8th rank. Now, Wolfgang doesn't want to give any principal advantages to Karpov here, because Karpov is the better player out of these two, and he is going to punish you for it. So in a position like this, he probably never wants to sacrifice the control of the A file by playing a move like rook takes a1, even though at multiple times the engine will actually suggest you to do so, thinking that white has no real way of continuing. So even though it is possible to take on the a1 square, Wolfgang really never does it. But that does beg the question, what do you play now if you are the black pieces? Wolfgang doesn't really know, and he plays rook f c8, which actually does come with a threat. The threat now is that we are threatening to play c takes b, there is a pin. This is one of the only moves that actually has a purpose until the end of the game for the black pieces, and Anatoly Karpov now needs to respond. The way he responds is super interesting. He plays this move bishop d3. The point is that we're getting the bishop out of the way, and we're also inviting some pressure in the position. If you play c4 in this position, we're just going to come back, and we spoke about this position being locked on this side of the board before. That's exactly what Anatoly Karpov wants. He wants the move c4 to be played so he can bring the bishop back to where he wanted it, and now this side of the board is completely locked, and there is no moves for the black side. Even though the engine is suggesting this is a plus 0.1 position for the white side, this is exactly what Anatoly Karpov wants. He wants this side of the board to be locked off. Now c4 doesn't happen immediately. Bishop d3 and g3 occurs. G3 happens because, you know, in the Roy Lopez, the idea is to reroute this knight finally to g3 and maybe jump the knight into the f5 square as well. So Wolfgang doesn't really want that to happen. He thinks that g6 is an improvement, a defensive improvement in this position, where he is kind of just strengthening his fortress. In response to this, Karpov plays knight g3 anyway. What's actually super funny about this position is there are moments where you can bring the knight in like this. You also might want to bring the knight to e2. A big part of Karpov's plan later on in the game is to play f4, and bringing the knight back to e2 is going to support this f4 push. You can actually, I'm going to put a move on the board that specifically allows for this, but king g7, something like king g7 would be a blunder because you can actually play knight f5 check, which is a brilliant move. After the pawn takes, you check with the bishop. They can't go here because you would allow checkmate in 2, but if the king goes to h8, you can play queen g5. The rook can defend momentarily, but you would pin it to the king. The rook cannot take because you would checkmate the king. So there are some lines where you can actually play that knight f5 check anyway. However, they are few and far between. Instead, Wolfgang plays this move bishop f8, making a little bit more space for his pieces. One thing that Wolfgang really has to avoid, you know, there are bad moves in this position for black, of course. Black can make bad moves. So one thing he doesn't want to do is get his pieces too tangled to where if Karpov does have a genuine attack brewing, he wants to be able to defend it no matter what. He doesn't want to trap his pieces in with each other. So a move like bishop f8, preparing to maybe bring the bishop back around to g7, is just going to allow other pieces in his position to have a little bit more space. Now this square on the e7 square is available for other pieces to shift into. So bishop f8 doesn't do a whole lot. It's just kind of shuffling the pieces around again. Karpov plays this very kind of perplexing move, rook a2. Not really a perplexing move, kind of just a waiting move in some way. You're kind of wanting to play rook a1, but there is one really nice idea that's going to come up in the next couple of moves. It's the most important move of this game by far, and it's probably one of the best moves that I've ever seen that you've never heard about before. Rook a2, obviously the intention is to slightly improve the position by bringing another rook underneath it. But after the move c4 is played, where do you put this bishop? This is a very important question. You can't bring it to c2 because you block the queen's defense of the a2 square. The top engine move here is actually to play bishop e2, but we spoke about this before. We brought the knight to g3 to bring it back to e2. So Anatoly Karpov doesn't want to play that either, even though it is the best move in the position. So justifying all of his plans from before, Anatoly Karpov brings the bishop back to b1, which the engine thinks is a complete mistake. It thinks it gives away all of the advantage that you've kind of worked for over the last couple of moves, and now there is no advantage. It thinks that you needed to keep the back rank open for the rook to slide in onto the a1 square. Anatoly Karpov begs to differ because he sees a move that I think is one of the best moves to ever be played in a game of chess. In response to bishop b1, Wolfgang Unzicker plays the move queen d8. He wants to shuffle his pieces around. Maybe the queen needs to get involved over this side of the board at some stage. Mainly, we're just kind of passing moves back and forth and letting white have its fun, knowing that we're in a fortress. Now comes one of the most diabolical moves I've ever seen, bishop a7. A move that chess.com still thinks is an inaccuracy, but you will see and you will understand the importance of this move bishop a7. The whole idea of bishop a7 is that we want to play bishop c2 and rook a1 without the rook being traded off. This bishop serves no other purpose being on the e3 square. It's not really doing anything. We may as well give it a purpose. Not to mention that the rook is trapped. We're not going to win the rook by any means, but it is in prison. It should be a new chess term. This is in prison. We're not going to be able to trap it at all. This position is still probably going to be a draw if two engines played it, but this rook cannot do anything. It's completely out of the game because of this move bishop a7. So the continuation in this game is pretty obvious. Black is going to continue shuffling around pieces, arguing that white has nothing, and white is going to continue with their plans. So we get the move knight e8, which frees up this pawn to kind of move forward. I don't think that the pawn is ever going to go forwards to f5 because there is too many attackers on this square. It's never really going to be an option for black anymore, but they can try to make more space with this f6 move at some stage. So this is kind of a more defensive thing. f4 might make more space in the position. Karpov is going to continue his plan of bishop c2. We know he wants to bring the rook over to a1 and justify the move bishop b1 to begin with, and we'll see Wolfgang has no moves. He still has no moves. We've said this for the past, 10 moves. He's not really doing anything. He plays knight c7, which doesn't really do anything. The knight has no extra potential on this square. Maybe if rook a1 isn't played, you can argue that knight a6 is a move, but Anatoly Karpov is of course going to continue with the most intuitive and obvious move in the position, rook a1. Wolfgang, again, has no moves. He plays queen e7, which does not help his position at all. It does not progress. You will see if we skip back, we're on move 26 right now. If we skip back to maybe move 18, we can see that this position has not really progressed at all for black. These pieces are all the same. These pieces have not improved. The pawn structure is relatively the same. The pieces have not improved. But if we skip towards move 26, and I want you to pay attention to white's pieces, mainly, white's pieces have slightly improved. This knight has gone here. We've gotten two rooks on the a file. The queen is on a much better space. It looks very, very clean for white. So white is making improvements here, whilst black isn't. Oh, you can see the evaluation bar. This is +1 for white now. The engine is now thinking that black is not doing a good job, and this is not a drawn game anymore. And it's all because of this move bishop a7, which completely suffocated the black position. You might be wondering though, and you're probably wondering this at every single turn of this game, what does white do now? It's a little bit difficult to see exactly what white should do at every given opportunity. I think the main kind of thing to think about in these positions, or in this position specifically, is that white wants to move its knights. It wants to move this knight back here and this knight back here. The whole idea is we want to play for f4 at some stage, which will be a very, very important move in kind of progressing the position. First, Karpov doesn't want to rush with anything. We know that Karpov only wants to play moves when he is absolutely sure that they are the right moves to play. So he plays bishop b1. I actually don't fully understand the idea of bishop b1. I guess the queen and the rook are now seeing each other, and you're kind of just getting the bishop out of the way. Maybe he thinks that there is no need to bring the rook to f1 anytime soon, so the bishop should be on the b1 square. I'm not exactly sure. The engine thinks that bishop b1 isn't the greatest move in the position. It thinks that bishop d1 is slightly better, but I think that I'm going to trust Karpov with this one, considering he's gotten to this position already, that bishop b1 is probably a fine move. The question, again, is, what does black do? Black does nothing really, bishop e8. It almost looks like a troll game, because black has just been shuffling its pieces back and forth. I promise this is a real game. This is a game that actually happened between two very talented players. Wolfgang was a multiple-time German chess champion. He was no scrub. He knew chess very well, better than anyone watching this video. So after bishop e8, we want to continue with the plan that we have outlined earlier, which is we want to play this move f4. There are a couple of things that we need to do to facilitate this move in the first place. The first move is what Karpov plays, and it is knight e2. This is so that when we eventually do play f4, we can recapture with either the knight or the queen. We want to just have some extra control of that f4 square. Question is now, what does black do? The answer to that is really nothing. They play knight d8. It's one of the, if not the best move according to the engine, and it does nothing. It's a nothing move. Essentially what these moves are doing, passing the turn on. They're not hurting the position. Most importantly, they're not hurting the position. That's like the very important thing. They're kind of passing a move without blundering. So, if black were to play a move like queen g5, this would not work, of course, because they're blundering a queen. I know that's a very extreme example of this, but they want to make moves that literally do nothing. They don't want to make their position worse. Anatoly Karpov can continue with his plan. He's got plans, black doesn't. Knight h2 is the idea. We want to strike for f4 on the next move. Bishop g7 is the next move for black. Again, just kind of passing the move over. This doesn't really improve the black position too much, and white can now go again. f4. We're continuing this very, very simple and thematic idea. One thing that is super important to note after the move f6, they can't play something like this, by the way. This blunders a free pawn. The bishop is no longer on the e7 square, so they can't play something like f5. One thing to note is after the move f6, which we spoke about before, we definitely don't want to take here. This allows f takes, and they've got too much space, and now they've actually got a file to work with. So if the rook can eventually make its way over to this file, it's going to be a lot more difficult for white to continue this attack. But it begs the question, what do we play? If we allow them to take, this pawn is going to be weak, and you know, even if our knight can take back, so let's say we play king h1, after f takes and something like knight takes, are we really better here? The engine is suggesting that this is also fine, but it's definitely not the most accurate way to play, and it's not the way that Karpov chooses to play either. So we can go all the way back here, and instead of playing something like king g1, we actually want to play f5 here. f5 is an absolutely gorgeous move. If they play something like g takes f, we're just going to play e takes f, and you'll notice black has even less space than they did before. Now they can't go to g6 or e6, and they also can't go to f6 because their pawn occupies that square now. If a move like this trying to put pressure on this pawn, we just go bishop e4, and there is absolutely nothing to be worried about. Maybe we can switch the focus onto this side of the board at some stage as well. So this is not really a viable solution. That position is plus 1.6 for the white pieces. So they don't want to take. They can also do nothing in this position. You're not forced to do anything, which is the correct way to play. The engine wants you to play knight f7 and continue to make nothing moves, force Karpov to find something. Wolfgang makes a mistake here. He plays g6. This is the first time in a while that Wolfgang has really allowed the evaluation to go into white's favor, and it's not a move that really looks like it's too damaging. It doesn't look like there's much of a way in here. You know, the knights they can start improving, but what are they actually doing? It doesn't seem like they're doing anything. Karpov disagrees. He first thinks that he should play bishop c2, bringing the bishop back to a square that it's been to a million times in this game. Bishop c2 allows the rook to come under to f1. Maybe that will be important at some stage. That is really essentially all I can think it does. It also gives Karpov some extra time on his clock, some increment time. This was a classical game, and it also forces Wolfgang to make another move. Wolfgang's move is the move bishop f7, again, just throwing the ball back into Karpov's court and asking him what he's going to do in this position. Karpov has a plan, and it's the plan that the engine likes too. Knight g3, slowly bringing our pieces over to this side of the board. Now the knight covers this. If something like h5 is played, we're going to play bishop d1. This was another idea of bringing the bishop to the c2 square. We can shuffle it around to this side of the board and make it work over here to become an active piece. So this is also something that can work. If they play something like h4, we actually don't want to jump in with a knight on h5. We probably can. It's not the most accurate way to play. We might want to play something like knight h1 and slowly bring around all of the knights like this. This would be a viable plan for white as well. h5 is not played, however. Wolfgang decides that he needs to waste a little bit more time and play knight b7. Again, not a terrible move. You'll notice how much the evaluation has grown over the last couple of moves. We're at plus 2.5 for the white position, and it's still not exactly clear how Karpov is going to make this work. It looks like it should, but I guarantee if I give this position to anyone watching this video, you all draw. I guarantee you all draw. None of you figure out how to make this work unless your opponent plays something real stupid. I guarantee if Wolfgang plays this position against any of you, he draws. He just draws. Maybe he'll win. You never know. But it's such a difficult position to see how you're supposed to win. I mean, looking at it now, I've studied this game for hours before I started recording this video. I don't see how I would do it. The way that I would do it is just because I saw Karpov do it. It's the only way I know how to because I saw him do it. If I put moves into an engine myself and see exactly what the engine wants me to do, I probably still wouldn't be able to do it. So, how does Karpov win this game from here? Knight b7 is played. Now he brings the bishop back to d1. This was the idea of going bishop c2. We want to bring the bishop around this way and get another piece into the game. Again, what does Wolfgang do in this position? It seems like the question we've constantly been asking. He wastes a move, h6. Not really a move that does anything. It just kind of, again, throws the ball back into Karpov's court. So, what does Karpov do? Well, it looks like we're running out of moves a little bit, but he plays bishop h5. This kind of looks like if I took the engine evaluation away from you guys, I'm really not sure if you'd be able to actually tell me with a decent accuracy who's better in this position. Because even though bishop h5 and all of these moves look like they're making progress, it's very impossible to find the finishing touch. I mean, what if they just don't take? What if they don't take in a position like this? It doesn't seem like there is going to be anything. What if, you know, they play king h7? and then they take, and then we take. It doesn't look like there is going to be any easy way for us to continue. Fortunately for us, we're not playing this game, and it's one of the greatest chess players in the world that is playing this game, so we don't have to concern ourselves with that. And Wolfgang plays the move bishop e8. He's going for some more firepower on this h5 square. Fortunately for Karpov, the queen can do the same thing for the white side and go to d1. It can also go to e2, but he chooses to go to d1. I don't think there's much of a difference there. Now we are threatening maybe to take on f7 at some stage, but most importantly, we are also defending our bishop on h5. Something that is really, really cool is that the move knight g4 actually opens up sometimes, because even though they will take, we can take back with the knight. I'll actually show it. We need to change the position just a little bit. We can play knight g4 here. I'm not saying that it's the best move right now, but it is a brilliant move. If they take, we take back with the knight. Suddenly you can't take with the queen because we get this check and we see the queen on the other side. So this is a very viable tactic in this position. So queen d1 is played, followed by knight d8, another wasteful move from Wolfgang. Now Karpov needs to continue. He chooses rook a3. I'm not convinced that does anything. I'm pretty sure that's just a wasted move by Karpov to get his opponent to do something. Yeah, I don't really see what rook a3 does. It doesn't seem to change the position too much. King f8 is the way that Wolfgang passes the move back to Karpov. And now we have a plethora of moves. The rook goes to a2. I really don't know what this does. Maybe there was some long-term plan that Karpov was seeing that he thought might be necessary. I think the most likely case is Karpov was very, very sure, 100% sure that he could waste moves and Wolfgang had nothing. He's probably sure of that for the past 20 moves, that there was no progress to be made for Wolfgang, so he can afford to kind of make these moves. This is what I was talking about earlier in the video though. He's shuffling his king back and forth. Move 37 is king f8, king g8, king f8, king g8 for the black pieces. That is literally, I'm not lying, you'll see that I'm not lying in just a second. That is what is played. Now, Karpov does go for this knight g4. He does get a brilliant move in this game. It wouldn't be a YouTube-worthy game if there were no brilliant moves. He does play this knight g4 move. We saw this tactic before. We saw how it works. This bishop is not actually hanging. Wolfgang goes king f8. He is just wasting moves. There is nothing to be played here. Knight e3 is the move that Karpov chooses to continue with. There are multiple continuations here, by the way. You can take on f7 if you really want to. There are plenty of continuations. The engine thinks that that white is going to have lots of ways to win here, but let's focus on the way that Karpov wants to win. He plays knight e3, revealing the queen's defense of this h5 bishop. King g8 is played, and now Karpov finally decides to cash in on this position and play bishop takes f7. You might think, what's changed? Now, after the knight takes on f7, the queen can go into h5, and the knights have shifted position. One important difference, in my opinion, is that the knight used to be on h2, and now the knight is on e3. So what's important about that? Well, it's very difficult to see from afar, and I think that Anatoly Karpov is one of the only people in the world that would be able to see it from so far out. The knight on h2 couldn't reach the same amount of squares that the knight on e3 does. But it looks like those squares don't matter. I mean, this is occupied, occupied, occupied. I mean, you can go here, but the knight just came from there. Why would you want to move it back? The point is that this pawn is not going to be unavailable forever. And we'll see that in just a couple of moves. Karpov saw this. He saw that his knight needed to be on e3 because it could eventually go to f5, which still looks like an impossible plan. I mean, this is a pawn that has another pawn in front of it. How is that square going to become available? Well, the reason is queen h5 is going to be played. The idea is that eventually maybe we want knight g4. Maybe we have something like h4 as well to try and break open the position. Queen h5 is a good move regardless. Just accelerating the position, improving our pieces whilst black stays the same. Knight d8 is played, suggesting a queen trade might be on the cards, but only on Karpov's terms. This is what Karpov saw from all that time ago. Queen g6. Now the knight can come into h5 because the queen has vacated that square. If the queens are traded off, these pawns that have been here for so long, suffocating so much space, will take another step in the same direction. This is not how the game ends, but I'll show it to you anyway because it is so brutal. Queen takes g6, f takes g6. We are suffocating so much space, and both knights get into the position like this, and there is no way to defend for black. This will result in a slow and painful death. This is what I was saying. There is no checkmate in sight, but there are still no good moves for black. This is always going to be a white win, and you can only pass turns until you eventually get checkmated. In this position, white is completely winning, plus 5.5. This is not what is played in the game. After queen g6, there is king f8, and knight h5 is played. This is threatening checkmate already. The engine wants you to play queen takes and allow the other knight to get in. If you don't play that and play something like queen e7, for example, the engine has a whole bunch of moves for you. Maybe knight g4 attacking this pawn over here. Something's going to fall in this position. This pawn is also falling. There is simply too much to defend, and black cannot hold on any longer. Usually when we look at games like this, Grandmaster games or historic games played by Grandmasters, we look at them because there are a bunch of brilliant moves in them, like Mikhail Tal games where he sacrifices his queen on every other move. This one's different because this one has one brilliant move that didn't really matter in this game. This was Karpov. This was the way that he played in almost every game that he had. If you go through any Karpov game, there will be remnants of this style of play in every game he played, and I think that's more impressive than any brilliant move that you can get in any kind of game. And the fact remains that over 50 years later, after this game was played, I don't think any Grandmaster in the world has been able to replicate the style of play that was played by Anatoly Karpov. I hope you all enjoyed today's video and are able to appreciate the true genius behind Anatoly Karpov. If you guys have any suggestions for Grandmaster games I should make videos on, leave them in the comments below, and if they get enough likes, I might make a video on them. But other than that, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.